A crack of thunder splits the sky, a flash of lightning tears the world apart. But who crafted that raw power into a weapon? The answer lies not with a god, but with three forgotten brothers. You are about to discover the true story of the Cyclopes, the divine blacksmiths who forged the thunderbolts of Zeus and built the very foundations of Olympus. By the end, you will know the epic tale of how three imprisoned giants shaped the fate of the cosmos. We will venture into the deepest prison of the ancient world and step inside a forge where storms are hammered into shape. What do you believe is the price for wielding absolute power? Before gods or mortals walked the earth, there was only chaos, a formless, yawning void. From this nothingness, the first beings emerged not as people, but as fundamental forces of existence. The solid ground beneath all things, Gaia, the earth, came into being. With her came the deep pit of Tartarus, an abyss so profound it would become the prison of the cosmos. Then came the binding force of Eros, representing love and attraction, the power that would bring order from the void. And from the darkness, Nyx, the personification of night herself. These were the primal parents of all that would follow. Gaia, longing for an equal, gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky, and he became her husband. Their union was incredibly fertile, producing the first great race of beings, the mighty Titans, who would one day rule the cosmos. They also produced three terrifying brothers known as the Hecatoncheires, each with 100 arms and 50 heads, beings of unimaginable raw strength. And then from this same primordial marriage came three more brothers. These were the Cyclopes. Forget the image of a simple cave-dwelling monster. These original Cyclopes were something else entirely. They were primordial forces given shape, the very embodiment of cosmic craftsmanship. Their names revealed their nature. Brontes, whose name meant thunder, Steropes, whose name meant lightning, and Arges, whose name meant brightness or flash. They were, in essence, a storm given humanoid form. And that single, central eye in their foreheads was not a mark of limitation, but of incredible, focused power. It symbolized a singular vision, an undivided attention that could see the heart of a material and shape it with divine skill. They were the universe's first master artisans, waiting for their purpose. But this golden age of creation was about to be shattered by a father's fear. Uranus, the sky, looked upon his children and felt not pride but dread. He saw the Cyclopes with their singular, burning eyes and their hands that could craft lightning, and he saw a threat. He saw the Hecatoncheires with their 100 grasping arms, and he saw chaos. To him, they were not his sons, they were monsters, abominations born of his union with the earth. And so, Uranus committed a crime that would poison the cosmos. He did not banish them or fight them. Instead, in an act of ultimate cruelty, he forced them back. He pushed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires deep into the body of their own mother, Gaia, sealing them within her darkest, most suffocating depths, the pit of Tartarus. Imagine that agony. The earth herself, Gaia, was tortured by the weight of her imprisoned children. The brothers were condemned to an endless, lightless existence, trapped in the very womb that gave them life. Their great strength was useless, their crafting skills meaningless in the absolute dark. This was not just imprisonment, it was a violation of the natural order. And within Gaia, a terrible resentment began to grow, a simmering fury against the sky that had wounded her so deeply. She carried this pain and this rage, waiting for the moment one of her other children would be brave enough or angry enough to seek vengeance. The Cyclopes, the living storm, became victims of a tyrant's fear, buried alive at the dawn of time. Their story as prisoners was just beginning, and the chains that held them would one day shape the greatest war the world would ever see. Gaia's pain festered into a plot for revenge. From her depths she fashioned a great, jagged sickle of adamant, the hardest substance in existence, and she took it to her Titan sons. She asked which of them would dare to rise up against their cruel father. Only the youngest, Cronus, possessed the necessary ambition and ruthlessness. He took the weapon, and when Uranus descended to embrace Gaia, Cronus struck. He castrated the sky, severing his power and his rule in one brutal act. With Uranus overthrown, Cronus claimed the throne of the cosmos for himself, ushering in the long, stagnant rule of the Titans. Now here is the crucial question. After suffering so terribly in the dark, did the Cyclopes and their 100-handed brothers finally taste freedom? Did their liberator, Cronus, pull them from the abyss? The answer is a devastating and resounding no. Cronus looked into the pit of Tartarus and saw the same thing his father had seen, raw power that could challenge him. He felt the same cold fear, so he did the unthinkable. He took the chains his father had forged and he tightened them. The Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires were condemned once more, sealed even deeper into their lightless prison. The irony is profound. The instrument of their father's downfall became the architect of their continued suffering. They traded one tyrant for another, their hope for liberation crushed by the very brother who had used their mother's grievance to seize power. For ages uncounted they languished. The living storm, the master craftsmen, remained buried, their potential frozen, their anger simmering in the absolute dark. They became a suppressed power, a forgotten weapon waiting beneath the foundations of the world. And while they waited, a new threat to Cronus was growing, one he could not so easily imprison. Cronus now ruled the cosmos, but his reign was poisoned from the start by the very act that gave him power. A prophecy, cold and inescapable, echoed in the halls of his palace. It declared that he, like his father before him, would one day be overthrown by his own child. This curse of succession became his obsession, and so Cronus devised a horrifying solution. Each time his sister and wife, the Titaness Rhea, gave birth, he would take the newborn infant and swallow it whole. He consumed his children, imprisoning them within his own divine body, believing this would prevent the prophecy from ever coming true. One by one, the first Olympians vanished into that dark, internal prison. Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, Demeter, the future goddess of the harvest, Hera, who would become queen of the gods, Hades, the stern lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, the future master of the seas. 5 divine children, swallowed and silenced, their power trapped within their father's gut. The Titan king believed he had outwitted fate, but he underestimated a mother's love and her cunning. When Rhea was pregnant with her 6th child, her grief and fury could no longer be contained. She would not surrender another baby to that terrible hunger. She went to her parents, Gaia and Uranus, and they provided a plan. When her time came, Rhea retreated to a secluded cave on the island of Crete. There she gave birth to a son, Zeus. But instead of presenting the infant to Cronus, she wrapped a large stone in swaddling clothes, a deceiving bundle that she offered to her husband. Consumed by paranoia and without a second glance, Cronus seized the stone and swallowed it, believing he had once again secured his throne. Meanwhile, the true child, the infant Zeus, was hidden away. He was raised in secret on Crete, far from his father's gaze. The nymphs Adrasteia and Ida cared for him, and a gentle goat named Amalthea became his nurse, her milk nourishing the future king of the gods. To mask the baby's cries from his searching father, the Curetes, armored dancers, performed loud, clashing war dances outside the cave, and so Zeus grew. He grew not in the gilded halls of a palace, but in the wild, rocky landscape of a hidden island. He drank the milk of a beast and learned the secrets of the earth from nymphs. This was not the upbringing of a pampered prince, but of a survivor, a strategist forged in secrecy. With each passing year, his strength and his wisdom grew in the shadows, a gathering storm that the Titan king, smug in his false security, could not see coming. The stage was set not just for a rebellion, but for a revolution, and its leader was waiting for his moment to strike. Zeus was no longer a hidden infant. He was now a powerful young god, his mind sharpened by years of secrecy and his will forged by a righteous fury. He knew his destiny, and he knew the terrible cost of failure. To challenge the Titan King and his vast, established armies would be a near impossible task. Cronus commanded the loyalty of nearly all the Titans, beings of immense elemental power. Zeus needed more than courage. He needed a weapon, an advantage so profound it could shatter the old order. And in the darkest corner of his mind, a memory stirred, a story whispered by his mother Re, or perhaps intuited from the earth itself. It was the tale of his uncles, the three brothers and their 100-handed siblings, wrongfully imprisoned by 2 generations of tyrants. They were not just prisoners, they were a suppressed army, a reservoir of fury waiting to be unleashed. This was his gambit. The young god would not just free his swallowed siblings from his father's gut, a task he had already accomplished with a clever potion. He would journey to a place even the Titans feared. He would descend into the pit of Tartarus itself. This was not a simple journey. Tartarus was not just a location, it was a condition, an absolute absence of light and hope. The air grew thick and cold, the very concept of direction dissolving into a suffocating gloom. It was the prison of the cosmos where forgotten things were left to rot for eternity. Here, Zeus first encountered the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones. In that profound darkness, their forms were a nightmare of shifting shadows, a forest of arms and a chorus of murmuring heads. They were chaos given flesh, and a lesser being would have fled in terror, but Zeus stood firm. He saw not just monsters but victims. He spoke to them not as a jailer but as a liberator. He offered them the one thing they had been denied for eons, a chance to walk free under the open sky, to use their unimaginable strength not as a curse but for a purpose. Their response was a rumble of agreement that shook the very foundations of the abyss. And then, deeper still, he found them, the 3 Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. They were not the wild beasts of later tales. Chained in the absolute dark, their great forms were still, their singular eyes dimmed by despair. They were master craftsmen with nothing to craft, a living storm trapped in a bottle. Zeus approached them and made his offer. It was not a command from a new king, but a proposition from a nephew who understood injustice. He spoke of their shared enemy, Cronus, the brother who had betrayed them. He spoke of a war to remake the heavens, and in exchange for their freedom, he asked for their help. He asked for their skill. The silence that followed was heavier than the chains. Then a light began to glow deep within each great eye. It was not just the light of hope, but the focused, burning light of a forge being reignited. They had been offered a purpose they accepted. With a strength that came from millennia of pent-up rage, they shattered their own bonds. The sound was like mountains breaking. In that moment, the balance of power in the universe shifted. Zeus had just recruited the divine arms manufacturers, and the Titanomachy, the great war for the cosmos, truly began. The liberation from Tartarus was not a gentle return to the world of light. For the Cyclopes, freedom meant one thing: reclaiming their purpose. They did not seek a palace or a throne. They sought a forge. Their workshop was not built by mortal hands or even by divine decree. It was a place born of necessity, a convergence of the rawest elements in the cosmos. While later myths would place them in the volcanic fires of Mount Etna or within the great smithy of Hephaestus, their original anvil was something far more primordial. Picture the heart of a newborn star, or the moment a continent is born from the sea. Their workshop existed in a space between realms where the fabric of reality was thin enough to be shaped. The air itself shimmered with unbearable heat, not the heat of a simple fire, but the foundational warmth of creation. The sound was a constant, deafening symphony, the deep, resonant ringing of celestial anvils being struck with force enough to shape mountains. Rivers of molten metals, not just iron or bronze, but the very essence of solidified lightning and condensed storm clouds, flowed in glowing channels across the floor. This was a laboratory of elemental chaos. Here, the Cyclopes did not merely hammer metal. They performed a kind of divine alchemy. Brontes, the embodiment of thunder, would capture the rolling, world-shaking boom that follows a lightning strike, condensing that sound into a palpable, vibrating core. Steropes' lightning would draw down the blinding, forking energy from the chaotic skies, wrestling its wild paths into a focused, linear fury. And Arges' brightness would harvest the pure, blinding flash that illuminates everything for a split second, compressing that radiance into a searing point of light. Their great, singular eyes allowed them to see not just the physical metal before them, but the threads of energy woven through it. With hammers that were extensions of their own will, they began to weave these three separate forces, thunder, lightning, and flash, into a single, coherent physical form. They were not building a weapon, they were building a contained cataclysm, a focused storm given a handle. And as the first prototype began to take shape on the anvil, the universe held its breath. The power they were about to unleash would not just win a war, it would redefine the very concept of authority. The anvil's first strike echoed like the birth of a new world. Brontes, his massive frame taut with concentration, did not simply hammer metal. He channeled a force. From the chaotic ether, he drew the deep, resonant vibration that precedes a cataclysm, the booming promise of the storm. He gathered the sound that makes mountains tremble and the chest tighten with primal awe, compressing that rolling thunder into a dense, humming core at the heart of the forming weapon. This was the base note of destruction, the weight behind the flash. Then came Steropes. Where Brontes worked with sound, Steropes worked with pure, violent motion. His hands moved in a blur, not just shaping but capturing. He reached into the frayed edges of reality and seized the jagged, forking paths of raw lightning. Think of it as trying to weave 1,000 furious serpents, each one a line of incandescent energy that wants to escape in every direction at once. With impossible skill, he braided these chaotic streaks together, taming their wildness into a focused, linear fury that wound around the thundering core. The weapon now had its voice and its strike. Finally, Arges approached. His role was the most subtle and the most terrifying. He did not add more force, but rather a quality of utter finality. From the silent instant that follows the flash, the moment of absolute, blinding clarity, he distilled pure brightness. This was not illumination, it was annihilation. He infused the coiled lightning with this searing essence so that the bolt would not merely hit its target, it would erase the very shadow of it, leaving behind a scorched imprint of absolute light. This was not smithing, it was a three-part symphony of elemental binding. The result was not a spear or a javelin. It was a thunderbolt, a physical object that contained a contained storm, a hierarchy of power made manifest. The thunder for intimidation, the lightning for execution, and the brightness for purification. Its very existence sent a shockwave through the fabric of the cosmos, a declaration that a new order was not just coming, it was already forged. Whoever held this weapon did not merely command an army, they commanded the weather of the heavens themselves. The ultimate symbol of authority had been pulled from the anvil, and it was waiting for a hand worthy enough to wield it. The thunderbolt was only the opening salvo of their genius. With the fate of the cosmos hanging in the balance, the Cyclopes' forge became the armory of a revolution, crafting tools that would define the new pantheon's very identity. For Zeus' brothers, they created instruments that perfectly matched their destined domains. For Hades, the future lord of the dead, they forged something profoundly subtle and terrifying, the helm of darkness. This was not a weapon of brute force, but one of absolute negation. Fashioned from the shadows of the deepest abyss and the silence of forgotten places, the helm did not merely conceal its wearer, it erased their presence from perception. When Hades donned it, he became a void in the fabric of reality, moving unseen and unfelt, a perfect tool for stealth, espionage, and sowing primal fear on the battlefield. It was the embodiment of the underworld's final mystery. For Poseidon, they channeled a different kind of power. From the unyielding bedrock of the ocean floor and the relentless pressure of the deep, they hammered his trident. This was no fancy spear. Its three prongs represented his dominion over the seas, the earthquakes, and the storms above them. A single strike from it could cleave continents, summon tidal waves from calm waters, or stir the very bones of the earth into a trembling fury. It was the scepter of a restless, elemental king. These artifacts were far more than magical gear. They were the physical manifestations of the Olympians' authority, the tools that would carve their legends into the world. The Cyclopes were not just making weapons, they were defining the very portfolios of the gods, giving tangible form to the abstract powers they would wield for eternity. Each creation shifted the balance of the war, but the true test was still to come. Could these divine instruments actually topple the reign of the Titans? For 10 long years, the cosmos was a battlefield. The Titanomachy, the war for the universe, raged across the heavens and the earth. On one side stood Cronus and his Titan siblings, beings of immense ancient power who had shaped the world. They commanded the very mountains and seas, and their strength was the foundation of reality itself. Arrayed against them was the new generation, the Olympians, led by Zeus. They were younger, fiercer, and fueled by a righteous fury, but they were desperately outnumbered. The conflict descended into a brutal stalemate. The Titans could not dislodge the upstart gods from their strongholds, and the Olympians could not break the entrenched lines of their forebears. It was a grinding war of attrition, a cosmic deadlock where neither side could land a decisive blow. The world itself groaned under the strain, its landscapes shattered and remade with each clash. Victory seemed a distant, fading dream for Zeus and his siblings. They had freed the prisoners of Tartarus, but raw power alone was not enough. They needed a breakthrough, a single, shattering moment that could crack the old order wide open. That moment arrived when the three brothers stepped onto the field, armed not with numbers but with masterpieces. The thunderbolt made its debut not with a whisper but with the end of the world. High above the fray, Zeus raised the first of his divine weapons. In his hand, it was not just an object, it was a contained rebellion, a captured storm yearning to be free. He drew back his arm, and the sky itself seemed to draw a breath. Then he hurled it. What followed was not an explosion, but an unraveling. A line of pure, white fury tore across the heavens, so bright it burned the color from the sky. It struck the heart of the Titan ranks, and the sound that followed was not a bang, but a deep, world-breaking crack. The very air shattered. Mountains that had stood since the dawn of time were not merely toppled, they were vaporized, leaving behind glassy, molten scars. The earth split open in jagged, smoking canyons. The flash illuminated the faces of the Titan army, and for the first time in eternity, their expressions were not of rage or confidence, but of pure, unadulterated terror. This was not a power they understood. It was not the slow, grinding force of the earth or the sea. This was instantaneous, absolute, and utterly unforgiving. It was the sound of thunder given form, the path of lightning made solid, the finality of a flash made permanent. While Zeus shattered the sky, his brothers moved like ghosts and earthquakes. Wearing the helm of darkness, Hades became a walking void. One moment, a Titan commander would be rallying his forces. The next, he would simply vanish, plucked from the midst of his own army by an unseen, unfelt hand. Panic, that most corrosive of weapons, began to spread through the Titan ranks. They were fighting an enemy they could not see, an enemy who could be anywhere or everywhere at once. Meanwhile, Poseidon drove his trident into the ground. The earth did not tremble, it convulsed. Continents groaned and shifted, the solid ground beneath the Titan's feet becoming a treacherous, heaving sea of rock and soil. Tidal waves, summoned from distant oceans, crashed over coastal strongholds, washing away fortifications built over millennia. The Cyclopes had not just given the Olympians weapons, they had given them new realms of warfare, psychological terror, geological upheaval, and celestial fury. The stalemate was over. The force multiplier of divine craftsmanship had tipped the scales irrevocably. The Titans, for all their ancient might, were fighting the past. The Olympians, armed with the future, were now writing it with every cataclysmic strike. The war was not yet won, but its outcome was now etched in lightning across the scarred face of the world. While Zeus shattered the heavens, the ground war required a different kind of cataclysm. This is where the other forgotten prisoners, the Hecatoncheires, entered the fray. Remember their names: Briareos, Cottus, and Gyges. If the Cyclopes were precision craftsmen, these three brothers were the embodiment of raw, overwhelming force. Each possessed 50 heads that saw and understood the battlefield from every angle, and 100 powerful arms that never tired. Zeus did not just free them from Tartarus out of pity, he saw their potential as the ultimate shock troops. Imagine the scene from the Titan perspective. You are holding a mountain pass, your shield wall is impregnable, your resolve is stone. Then the earth itself seems to rise up before you. Three colossal forms, a swirling forest of limbs and a chorus of roaring voices, crest the ridge. Before a single order can be shouted, the air turns black. Not with arrows, but with mountains. Each Hecatoncheire could seize 100 boulders the size of houses and hurl them with the force of a volcanic eruption. That is 300 projectiles launched in a single, simultaneous salvo. It was not an attack, it was a geological event. The Titan lines did not break, they were simply erased, buried under an avalanche of shattered rock and dust. This was Zeus's strategic masterstroke. He created a combined arms assault on a divine scale. From above, he wielded the focused, surgical fury of the thunderbolt, striking command centers and sowing instant terror. On the ground, the Hecatoncheires provided an unstoppable tide of blunt force trauma, a rolling barrage that no formation could withstand. One brother provided the lightning, the other three provided the earthquake. Together, they mobilized every suppressed power of the old world, every ounce of fury that Cronus had tried to bury, and turned it against him. The Titans were not just facing a new generation of gods, they were facing the very wrath of the abyss, now unleashed and fighting for the other side. The final, deafening silence after the war was more profound than any thunderclap. The Titans were broken, their ancient reigns shattered upon the anvils of the Cyclopes, and the mountains hurled by their 100-handed brothers. With the cosmos lying in ruins, a new order had to be built from the ashes. The three victorious Olympian brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, stood before the spoils of a universe. To avoid the very conflicts that had toppled their father, they chose a method of pure, impersonal chance. They drew lots. Each brother reached into a vessel, and fate itself decided the division of all creation. Zeus drew the sky, the vast, boundless expanse above. This was not just a domain, it was the seat of ultimate authority, the throne from which he could oversee all things. Poseidon drew the rolling, endless seas, all the oceans, rivers, and hidden depths of the world. Hades drew the underworld, the shadowy realm of the departed, a kingdom of profound silence and finality. This tripartite division established the fundamental architecture of the mythic world, a balance of realms that would define countless stories to come. But what of the defeated? The Titans could not be left to roam free. In a moment of poetic and brutal justice, Zeus commanded that they be cast down into the very pit that had once held his uncles, the deep prison of Tartarus. And who would guard these formidable prisoners forever? The duty fell to the Hecatoncheires, Briareos, Cottus, and Gyges. The brothers who had been its most famous inmates now became its eternal wardens. With their 50 heads and 100 arms, they could watch every corner of the abyss, ensuring no Titan would ever claw their way back to the light. This was a perfect closure, the suppressed power of the old world now tasked with containing it. And the Cyclopes, their reward was their purpose fulfilled. They were hailed as the architects of victory, the master smiths without whom the new age could never have dawned. They did not seek a kingdom of their own, for their kingdom was the forge. They continued their craft, often said to work alongside the god Hephaestus in his volcanic workshops, their legendary skill forever woven into the fabric of divine power. So remember this, the reign of the Olympians, the very structure of the world as the ancient Greeks understood it, did not rise solely from Zeus's might or his brother's courage. It was built quite literally, bolt by bolt, trident by trident, upon the craftsmanship of three forgotten brothers and the liberated strength of their monstrous siblings. The new world was forged in their prison, and its foundations were hammered firm by their hands. Peace did not mean the end of their work, only a change in its purpose. The Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges did not fade into legend after the war. Instead, they ascended to the very peak of the new world they had helped create, becoming the foundational craftsmen of Olympus itself. Their forge was no longer a hidden workshop of rebellion, but the beating industrial heart of a divine civilization. Here, they often worked alongside Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalwork. Think of it as a collaboration between the ultimate specialist and the original masters. Hephaestus brought incredible artistry and ingenuity, while the Cyclopes brought that primordial, focused power, the ability to see and shape the raw essence of things. Together, they turned the mountain of the gods into a place of impossible wonders. The gleaming palaces that housed each deity, structures that seemed to be carved from light and cloud, were not merely built, they were crafted. The Cyclops' hands laid the foundations that could withstand eternity, and their eyes ensured every column, every arch held a perfect divine symmetry. Their craft expanded from weapons of conquest to the very infrastructure of paradise. They forged the magical gates of the sun and moon, the chariots that carried celestial bodies across the sky, and the intricate, automated servants that populated the halls of the gods. Even the arrows of Artemis and Apollo, so famed for their unerring accuracy, were said to pass across their anvils, receiving a final blessing of perfect form and flight. The living storm had been channeled. Once they concentrated thunder and lightning into a bolt for Zeus. Now they distributed that same foundational skill into 1,000 marvels, from the grandest palace to the smallest, most perfect arrowhead. They became the unseen architects of daily life on Olympus, their singular vision ensuring that the home of the gods was not just a stronghold but a masterpiece. Yet even within the divine forge, tensions could simmer. The relationship between the primordial Cyclopes and the Olympian god Hephaestus was a fascinating blend of respect, collaboration, and underlying rivalry. Think of it as a workshop where the ancient masters of raw, elemental power worked alongside the brilliant, innovative engineer. In many myths, the Cyclopes were not merely Hephaestus's assistants, they were his foundational teachers, the ones who first instructed the lame god in the deepest secrets of metallurgy and cosmic craftsmanship. Their singular vision helped him see the soul of the materials he worked with. Together, they pushed the boundaries of creation far beyond simple weapons. Their most famous collaborative project was Tolos, the giant bronze automaton tasked with guarding the island of Crete. This was not a simple statue. The Cyclopes helped Hephaestus forge its immense bronze body, infusing the metal with a durability that could withstand ages, while a single, mystical ichor fluid, sealed within its frame by their combined skill, granted it life and motion. They were building a thinking, moving fortress, blending Hephaestus's ingenuity with the Cyclopes' command over primal, animating forces. This partnership extended to the gear of heroes and gods alike, from Achilles' famed armor to the intricate mechanisms of Olympus itself. Yet, this productive alliance was not without its dark chapters. A stark story reveals the fragile peace of the new age. After the physician Asclepius, son of Apollo, was struck down by a Zeusian thunderbolt for resurrecting the dead, the sun god was consumed by a grief that demanded a target. In his rage, Apollo did not attack Zeus directly, an impossible feat. Instead, he turned his vengeance upon the bolt's creators, the Cyclopes. He journeyed to their forge and slew them, holding them responsible for crafting the instrument of his son's death. This act was a profound violation, an attack on the very architects of Zeus's power, and it provoked the king of the gods to fury. Zeus punished Apollo severely, forcing him into servitude for a year. The tale is deeply revealing. It shows that even after their great service, the Cyclopes could be seen as disposable craftsmen, casualties in the personal conflicts of the Olympians they served. Their existence was one of immense power, yet also of perpetual vulnerability, caught between the gratitude of the gods and the dangerous fallout of their own unparalleled skill. But this leaves us with a profound contradiction. How did the noble, divine blacksmiths of creation become the one-eyed, cave-dwelling cannibals of later legend? The answer lies in a slow cultural transformation, a splitting of a single archetype into two. Our earliest, most authoritative source, Hesiod's Theogony, presents the Cyclopes exactly as we have described them. Brontes, Steropes, and Arges are the master artisans, the respected uncles of Zeus, essential to cosmic order. They are civilization's ultimate craftsmen. Yet, centuries later, in Homer's epic The Odyssey, we meet a very different Cyclops. His name is Polyphemus. He is not a skilled smith, but a savage, pastoral giant who herds sheep on a remote island. He lives in a filthy cave, devours human visitors raw, and bellows in monstrous rage when blinded. This is not a god, but a monster, a pure obstacle for the cunning hero Odysseus to overcome. This stark shift is not a simple mistake, but a fascinating evolution in storytelling. Later poets like Homer were not writing cosmic origin myths. They were crafting human-centered adventures about heroes, cleverness, and the struggle against chaotic, inhuman forces. The civilized, Olympian craft of the original Cyclopes had been claimed by gods like Hephaestus. There was no narrative room for nuanced, divine smiths in a story about a man trying to get home. The Cyclops archetype was thus repurposed. It became a perfect symbol of everything the Greek world feared, the antithesis of their values. Polyphemus represents raw, untamed nature, brute strength without intelligence or law. He has no agriculture, no ships, no community, and no respect for the sacred rules of hospitality that were the bedrock of ancient Greek society. He is a force of pure, appetitive chaos. This separation served a symbolic purpose. It drew a clear line between the ordered, civilized world of the Olympian gods and humanity, and the wild, terrifying primal forces that still lurked at the edges of the map. The noble Cyclopes were enshrined in the past as founders. The monstrous Cyclopes inhabited the present as threats. This dual legacy is their true story, one of elevation and demonization, reminding us that a culture's heroes and monsters are often two sides of the same ancient coin. This profound split in the Cyclops myth reaches its most chilling and personal form in a single name, Polyphemus. His story, told by Homer centuries after Hesiod, is not one of cosmic creation, but of a dark, claustrophobic struggle for survival. Odysseus, the wandering hero of the Trojan War, finds himself trapped with his men in the cave of this monstrous shepherd. This is no divine workshop, but a filthy cavern reeking of sheep and worse. Polyphemus is not a craftsman, he is a consumer, a devourer. He seizes two of Odysseus's men, dashes their brains out against the stone floor, and consumes them raw. The horror is visceral and absolute. The cleverness of Odysseus's eventual escape, the blinding of the giant's single eye with a heated olive wood stake, the desperate clinging to the bellies of sheep to flee the groping hands of the enraged monster, these are the details that have echoed through millennia. But to see Polyphemus merely as a monster is to miss the deeper tragedy. He is explicitly named as a son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. This makes him a direct descendant, a nephew of the original Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. He is of their divine bloodline, yet he represents its utter degradation. Isolated on his remote island, he has no forge, no craft, no community. His great strength is used only for herding flocks and committing atrocity. He is a fallen branch of the family tree, a perversion of the noble, focused power his uncles embodied. Their singular eye saw the heart of the cosmos to shape it. His singular eye sees only prey. This reframes the entire encounter. Odysseus's brilliant, ruthless trickery is more than just a hero outsmarting a brute. It becomes a symbolic clash between two fundamental forces, human cunning and civilization, represented by the wily, strategic king against raw, untamed and purposeless strength. Polyphemus is not just a monster to be defeated, he is a warning of what happens when immense power is severed from wisdom, skill and law. He is the living ghost of what his glorious uncles might have become had they remained forever imprisoned in the dark, their potential twisted into something only capable of destruction. That single central eye is far more than a physical trait. It is a symbol of immense power, and like all power, its meaning depends entirely on how it is used. For the original Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes and Arges, that eye was the ultimate tool of creation. It represented a singular, undivided focus, a craftsman's vision that could see the potential in raw chaos and shape it into a thunderbolt. Their entire being was concentrated through that one lens, allowing for a precision that split the difference between a storm cloud and a weapon. This is the eye of the artist, the inventor, the master who sees the finished masterpiece within the unformed block. It is a symbol of profound creativity where all distractions are burned away, leaving only the pure act of making. Yet that same symbol holds a terrifying opposite. For Polyphemus, the very same physical feature represents a catastrophic limitation. His single eye sees only what is directly in front of him, the immediate appetite, the present threat. He possesses no foresight, no peripheral vision, no ability to see the consequences of his actions. When Odysseus tells him his name is nobody, Polyphemus believes it literally because he cannot see the trick. When he is blinded, his rage is immense but directionless because he cannot see his enemy escaping. This is the eye of the brute, narrowed to a point of such extreme concentration that it becomes a prison, seeing only one thing and missing the entire world around it. One eye can forge a universe, the other cannot even see a lie. This duality stretches beyond Greek myth into a global tapestry of symbolism. Often, the single eye is linked to the sun, that great celestial body that sees all in its light. It becomes a source of knowledge, of illuminating truth, burning away shadows and deception. Yet, a gaze that intense can also scorch. This connects to the ancient concept of the evil eye, a malevolent stare that is believed to project harm, a concentrated beam of envy or hatred that can blight crops or sicken children. It is a laser of negative intention, and from there we find the all-seeing eye, like the eye of providence on the American dollar bill, representing a divine or sovereign oversight, a watchful presence that sees every action for judgment or for protection. So the Cyclops' eye is not just a body part, it is an idea. It asks a fundamental question about power itself. Is your greatest strength also your greatest blind spot? Does your focused vision allow you to build wonders, or does it trap you in a cave of your own making? The myth gives us both answers, a warning and an inspiration, written in the light of one unwavering gaze. Their forge was never just a location. It was a state of being, a fundamental law of the cosmos made visible. The three brothers, Brontes, Steropes and Arges, did not merely work with fire and metal. They were the living conduits for a universal principle, the chaotic, raw energy that must exist for anything new to be born. Every volcanic eruption that tears a mountain apart is an echo of their hammer striking the anvil, a violent act of creation that brings new, fertile land from destruction. Every jagged bolt of lightning that splits the night sky is a stray spark flying from their workshop, a fragment of that same divine power escaping into the world. Their story teaches us that order does not simply appear, it is forged, it is hammered into existence from the raw, unruly material of what came before. The reign of the Titans represented an old, stagnant order, a chaos of entrenched power. The Olympians represented a new structure, a system of laws and domains. But between the two, there had to be a catalyst, a transformative fire. The Cyclopes were that fire. They personified the necessary, terrifying, and beautiful violence of change itself. They took the diffuse chaos of a storm and focused it into a thunderbolt. They took the shadows of the abyss and compressed them into a helm. In doing so, they demonstrated that true power is not about suppressing chaos, but about mastering it, about directing its incredible force toward a purpose. Without their transformative energy, the universe would have remained frozen, trapped under the weight of the old Titan rule. They are the mythic answer to a profound question: how does anything new ever come to be in a world already full? The answer is a forge. It is the acceptance of necessary destruction, the embrace of heat and pressure and deafening noise, all channeled by a singular, unwavering vision. That is their ultimate legacy, not just as characters in a story, but as an eternal symbol. They remind us that every act of creation, whether building a civilization or crafting a simple idea, requires first confronting and shaping the wild, raw materials of chaos. The stories feel timeless, but their origins are often startlingly physical. The terrifying image of a one-eyed giant may not have sprung from pure imagination, but from a simple, ancient misunderstanding found in the earth. On the island of Crete and across other Mediterranean islands, archaeologists have unearthed the fossilized skulls of prehistoric dwarf elephants. These creatures, long extinct by the time of the ancient Greeks, left behind a very peculiar relic. To an ancient farmer or shepherd who knew nothing of paleontology, stumbling upon one of these skulls would be a shocking discovery. The large, singular cavity in the center of the skull, where the trunk attached, bears an uncanny resemblance to a massive, single eye socket. The smaller, actual eye sockets on the sides of the skull could easily be overlooked or misinterpreted. In a single moment, a real, tangible object provides the blueprint for a monster. This fossil becomes a seed planted in the collective mind that grows into the legend of the Cyclopes. It is a perfect example of how myth often begins not with a lie, but with an attempt to explain the unexplainable, to give form to a mysterious artifact from a forgotten age. But the myth is more than just a strange skull. The Cyclopes are not passive monsters, they are active forces linked to fire, metal, and cataclysmic power. This connects to another potent real-world phenomenon the ancients witnessed but could not scientifically explain: volcanic activity. The Mediterranean is a ring of fire, home to volcanoes like Mount Etna in Sicily, which was said to be the forge of Hephaestus and the Cyclopes. Imagine witnessing an eruption in the ancient world. The ground shakes with a sound like a giant's hammer. The sky darkens with ash. Rivers of fire, molten rock that glows like liquid metal pour from the mountain's wounds. At night, the red glow illuminates the clouds from below. To an observer, it would look exactly like a colossal underground workshop was at work. The booming eruptions are the sound of the anvil. The flowing lava is the spilled metal from the forge. The lightning that often dances within the volcanic plume becomes the sparks flying from their hammers. The myth provides a narrative, a reason, for the terrifying and awe-inspiring geologic violence they could see with their own eyes. It personifies the earthquake and the eruption, giving it a face and a purpose, transforming random natural terror into a story about divine craftsmen at work. Even their most famous creation, the thunderbolt, finds a potential root in observation. Before the science of atmospheric electricity, what was lightning? It was a terrifying, brilliant weapon hurled from the sky, leaving the smell of ozone and scorched earth in its wake. It split trees and ignited fires in an instant. The logical conclusion for a culture that saw gods in every natural force was that such a precise, violent instrument must have been made. If the rumble of a volcano was the sound of a forge, then the lightning bolt was its greatest product, stored in the clouds and thrown by the king of the gods. The myth of the Cyclopes elegantly ties together these disparate, frightening natural phenomena: the strange bones in the ground, the fiery mountains, and the angry sky, into a single, coherent story. It does not invent from nothing, it weaves. It takes the strange clues left by the natural world and assembles them into a narrative that explains the origins of power itself. The giants are not just monsters in a cave, they become the personification of the Earth's creative and destructive fury, a way for humanity to look into the volcano's heart or hold a fossil and say, "I understand where this came from." It was made. Their legacy did not end with the ancient poets. The singular gaze of the Cyclopes has burned its way into the heart of modern storytelling, where filmmakers and authors continue to wrestle with their dual nature. The choice is always stark. Will they be the monster or the maker? For decades, the monstrous interpretation dominated our screens. Think of the iconic, terrifying Cyclops in the 1958 film The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, brought to life through the genius of Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion animation. This creature, with its lumbering gait and bestial rage, was a direct descendant of Homer's Polyphemus, a pure obstacle of flesh and fury for the hero to outwit or destroy. It cemented the image in popular culture as a one-eyed behemoth, a creature of nightmare rather than myth. This portrayal taps into a primal fear, the fear of the overwhelming, unintelligent brute, and it makes for a spectacular, straightforward villain. Yet, a fascinating shift has occurred in more recent years, a return to the older, more complex Hesiotic vision. Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series presents Cyclopes in a nuanced light. While some, like Polyphemus, remain antagonists, others are portrayed as skilled builders and loyal allies. Percy's own brother, Tyson, is a Cyclops who is not a monster, but a gentle-hearted, incredibly talented craftsman, embodying the ancient lineage of Brontes and Steropes. This reframing invites a younger generation to see beyond the monstrous exterior to the potential within, rehabilitating the archetype as one of misunderstood strength. Even more dramatically, the God of War video game series, particularly its later installments, delves deep into this dichotomy. Here, the Cyclopes are often enslaved, brutish laborers, their great strength exploited by the gods. But the games also feature Brock and Sindri, legendary dwarven blacksmiths whose unparalleled skill and singular focus on their craft are a clear, respectful nod to the original mythic artisans. Modern creators are not just retelling the old stories, they are actively choosing which thread of the ancient tapestry to pull. When they choose the monster, they are exploring themes of human ingenuity versus mindless power. When they choose the craftsman, they are rehabilitating a narrative about creation, skill, and the dignity of labor. This enduring flexibility is the true power of the myth. It asks us, the audience, a silent question every time we encounter a new version. What do you see when you look into that single eye? Do you see a threat to be eliminated or a potential to be harnessed? Our answer says as much about our own time as it does about the ancient world. The thunderbolt is more than a weapon, it is the ultimate symbol of crafted authority. In the hands of Zeus and later the Roman Jupiter, it became the unmistakable emblem of divine right, the final argument of the king of the gods. It was not merely a tool for smiting enemies, but the very instrument of cosmic order. A single bolt could punish hubris, enforce oaths, and deliver a terrifying form of justice that was as instantaneous as it was absolute. This idea of lightning as a force of moral reckoning echoes through our language even today. When we speak of a flash of inspiration or a bolt from the blue, moments of sudden, transformative clarity that seem to strike from a higher plane. The symbol proved so potent it transcended its mythological origins. You can see its forked shape on the insignia of modern air forces, a declaration of swift and decisive power from above. It flashes in the logos of energy companies, representing raw, electrifying force harnessed for human use. And in our modern pantheon of superheroes, the legacy is unmistakable. When the young Billy Batson shouts the wizard's name and is transformed into the mighty Captain Marvel, now known as Shazam, he is struck by a magical lightning bolt. That bolt does not harm him, it empowers him, granting the wisdom of Solomon and the power of Zeus. It is a direct inheritance from the Cyclopes forge, a symbol of righteous power transferred to a worthy champion. Every time we see that jagged line, whether on an ancient vase or a comic book cover, we are looking at the work of Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Their greatest creation outlived them, evolving from a physical object into a universal shorthand for ultimate power, sudden change, and the awe-inspiring moment when the sky itself passes judgment. This messy, contradictory end is perhaps their most humanizing legacy. After gifting the gods the tools of their reign, the Cyclopes' own fate becomes clouded in conflicting stories, a testament to how myth evolves through different voices and purposes. One tradition, the more hopeful one, suggests they simply continued their divine work. In this version, they became permanent fixtures in Hephaestus's great forge, their primordial skill an eternal asset to the running of Olympus. They faded into the background noise of creation, respected and immortal, forever shaping the wonders of the divine realm. This is a clean, satisfying end for loyal craftsmen. But another, darker strand of myth weaves a far more tragic conclusion, one that exposes the volatile and often unjust nature of the Olympian family. The chain of events begins with a healer named Asclepius, son of Apollo, a mortal of such profound skill that he learned not just to cure the sick but to recall the dead to life. This act, resurrecting humans from the underworld, was a direct violation of the cosmic order Zeus had established. It blurred the sacred boundary between life and death, threatening the balance of all things. In his fury, Zeus reached for the ultimate instrument of enforcement, a thunderbolt forged by the Cyclopes themselves. He hurled it, striking Asclepius dead. Apollo, the god of healing and light, was shattered by grief and rage. He could not attack Zeus directly, the king's power was absolute, so he turned his vengeance upon the only target within reach, the makers of the weapon. Apollo descended to the Cyclopes' forge and in a fit of divine fury slew the three brothers. He held them accountable for crafting the bolt that killed his son. The irony is profound and brutal. The master artisans who had secured Zeus's throne were now killed as collateral damage in a dispute between gods. Their great service granted them no protection from the whims of the Olympians they served. Zeus's reaction to this slaughter is equally telling. He did not resurrect the Cyclopes, for even his power had limits over final death. Instead, he punished Apollo severely, casting him down from Olympus and forcing him into a year of hard servitude, tending the flocks of a mortal king. This was a humiliating penance for a god, but it did not bring the smiths back. This contradictory tapestry of endings, peaceful service versus violent murder, reveals something essential about mythology itself. These stories were not composed by a single author with a consistent plot. They are a collective, living tradition where different cities, poets, and generations emphasized different truths. One storyteller might wish to honor the craftsman's eternal contribution. Another might need a tragic tale to explain the wrath of Apollo or the remote volcanic fires that sometimes go quiet. The messy fate of the Cyclopes reminds us that these were not historical figures with a single biography, but powerful symbols, their stories shaped by the needs of the narrative and the lessons each age wished to tell. They were the quiet, indispensable architects of the cosmos. Without the Cyclopes, the story we know simply could not exist. There would be no thunderbolt to break the Titan ranks, no trident to shake the earth, no helm to shroud the underworld in mystery. Zeus may have wielded the power, but the Cyclopes forged the very instruments that made his victory possible. They were the ultimate force multipliers, turning a desperate rebellion into a world-changing revolution. Yet their legacy extends far beyond that single, cataclysmic war. Consider the gleaming spires of Olympus, the self-moving tripods in the halls of the gods, the chariots of the sun and moon crossing the sky. This was not mere divine whim, it was divine infrastructure, and it was built by their hands. They provided the technical foundation upon which the splendor of the New Age rested. In this way, the three brothers became the essential bridge between two vastly different worlds. They emerged from the raw, untamed chaos of the primordial era, beings of storm and flash. But they used that very wildness to create tools of incredible precision, tools that would impose a lasting, if imperfect, order upon the universe. Their story reveals a profound and often overlooked truth about power. The mightiest ruler, the grandest vision, is utterly dependent on specialized skill. A king can command an army, but he cannot win a war without the blacksmith who forges the swords. Zeus could summon the storm, but he could not focus it into a weapon of cosmic justice without the craftsmen who understood its soul. The Cyclopes represent that foundational craft, the quiet expertise that translates ambition into reality. They remind us that behind every throne, behind every great empire or idea, there are master artisans whose names history may forget, but whose work shapes the world. Their singular eye saw not just metal, but possibility, transforming the chaos of creation into the architecture of a new divine order. The true weight of a thunderbolt is not in the hand that throws it, but in the forge where it was born. We celebrate the kings, the conquerors, the gods who stand in the spotlight of history, their names etched in marble and song, yet every throne requires a foundation. Every victory needs a weapon, and every age of gods needs its architects. The story of the Cyclopes is at its heart a tribute to the unseen makers. It is a myth for the builders, the artisans, and the craftsmen whose singular focus shapes the world from behind the curtain. They ask us to look past the wielder of power and see its source. Zeus commanded the sky, but he could not have claimed it without the bolt. Poseidon ruled the seas, but his trident was a gift. Hades presided over the silent kingdom, but his helm was crafted by another's hand. The glory belongs to the Olympians, but the means to that glory was hammered into existence by three brothers in a forgotten workshop. Their legacy is the quiet hum of creation that underpins every grand spectacle. It is the blacksmith whose sword wins the war, the stonemason whose arch holds up the cathedral, the engineer whose code builds the digital world. They are the indispensable force that translates vision into reality. So the next time you hear a crack of thunder or see a flash of lightning in a stormy sky, remember the story behind the symbol. See not just the anger of the heavens, but the focused eye of a craftsman, the swing of a divine hammer, the moment chaos was given form and purpose. The greatest power in the universe often lies not with those who issue commands, but with those whose hands and whose unwavering vision make those commands possible. So, where does your own fascination lie in this epic tale? Does it rest with the noble smiths Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, the quiet architects whose craft built a new world? Or does it pull you toward the terrifying, tragic figure of Polyphemus, the monstrous descendant whose story warns of power untamed by wisdom? Let us know in the comments which version of the Cyclops speaks to you most and why. And while you are thinking of these behind-the-scenes figures, consider the other unsung makers of myth. Who forged the chains that bound Prometheus? Who built the labyrinth for King Minos? Mythology is filled with these essential creators, whose stories often linger just outside the spotlight. If you enjoyed uncovering the true story of the Cyclopes, then you will not want to miss our next deep dive. Subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, so you are always here when we pull back the curtain on another untold epic, another forgotten legend waiting to be rediscovered. Until then, may your own creative fires burn bright. Thanks for watching.